This episode is with Jordan Austin. Jordan is a graduate of the University of Miami and is currently a performance coach at EXOS. In this episode, we dive into topics such as fitness, wellness, sports medicine, health. We talk a little bit about how these things affect one's performance in general, what can be done to improve performance, whether it be in the aspect of exercising or just to improve overall well-being and health. Thank you for being here. And if you do enjoy this, please consider subscribing, sharing this episode, or leaving a rating. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the episode. If you can just repeat that question again, that'd be great.
So just kind of like talking about like the transition for a lot of people who were former athletes that had their identity tied down to being an athlete. How has that transition been for you?
Yeah. I think going into when I made the decision to stop playing, it's something that or to go into the transfer portal, right? Because that was the initial, I guess, choice. The first option was to try to find a school that I wanted to go to for grad school and so on. And so when I made that decision, I think the most important aspect was realizing that once you start that process of trying to transfer to another school, there's a very good chance. I mean, of course, it depends on who you are, right? But there's a good chance that you will not end up in a school that you maybe want to go to, or that you'll get an opportunity from a school whose caliber is from this like the same as the one you are at right now. If you look at the statistics for transfers, at least for football, I'm not sure for other sports because I'm aware of the football ones, but it's a very few percentage of people that actually go into the transfer portal and then end up going to another school that's, I think, division. Like if you go from Division 1 to Division 1, it's pretty rare from what I know of. I'm pretty sure. Of course, like I said, it depends if you were a more prominent recruit in high school and so on. But going in, I knew that there was a real possibility that I would just not find something that I wanted to find. And I went into that decision feeling okay about that. And so making that transition after I didn't get any opportunities that I wanted, and I was like, okay, maybe it's best to just now focus on putting my time somewhere else. And realizing and accepting that I'm not going to play football anymore. That's okay. I knew this from the start. This is something that could have happened, and I'm 100% fine with it. And I think now it's time. At that point, I told myself, now it's time to put this extra time that I have, actually invest it in something that is productive, that can benefit me in some way, and that isn't just like throwing that extra time that I have in the day, throwing it away. Because that's what I didn't want to do. I think some people now have this, when we were in football, and you were there in the with the athletic training department, like people, we were there from 5 or 6 a.m. to like 11:30 or 12, and so that's about a slot of 5 or 6 hours every day that you now have free, and I didn't just want to waste that. So I guess to ease my transition and to be okay with it, I try to find productive things to put my time in. And it also helped that at that point I wasn't very, how do I explain this? I played the sport a lot and dedicated so much time to it that I didn't feel as passionate about it as I did before when I was younger. And so it wasn't something very hard for me to do to stop playing. Occasionally I miss it, and I think there's some aspects of it that I do miss. But I wasn't as much like in love with the sport as a lot of people are, and that also helped, I guess, not for me to not be too um down because of the transition, or to feel too overwhelmed because of the transition. And that's why I think it was easier. It was a variety of things that helped, but among those are, I wasn't that in tune into it anymore. I try to find better things to put my time in, or to more productive things for me personally to put my time in. And third, to just from the beginning accept the fact that that was a very real possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that I don't know a lot about is just that transfer portal process. I mean, you see on the news, oh my God, so and so transferred, they're gonna do this X, Y, and Z. That's like one person. Then you find out there are hundreds of athletes in the portal, and then you realize hundreds of athletes don't get to choose where they want to go. They don't get to
Yeah.
go to a big time school, and they have to live with that. Um, but next thing for you is just gonna ask, like, with with regards to that, the transition and things you do to fill that time up, like, do you have a bucket list or things you are chipping away at, or right now just kind of taking it day by day, filling up with reading, education, stuff like that?
As for like kind of what I want to do in the future.
I know in that 6 hour block you mentioned, like waking up
Oh,
instead of
okay,
waking up
okay,
at
okay.
5 o'clock for sports, now you have, I'm not saying you wake up at 5 o'clock every day, but
Right.
from 5 to 12, you had that 7 hour, 6 hour block, like you mentioned. What are you doing in that time? Or are there things you're working on that work towards a bucket list item?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I took away, one of the many things that I took away from playing and from being at the place where I was at, is the discipline of, again, doing things you don't necessarily want to do. We talked about this at the beginning, um, before, we had the recording problem, but we talked about how, you by running a lot and by training, you have the discipline to kind of keep going and to do things you don't want to do. It was the same with football. A lot of times you have to wake up at a time that you don't want to wake up at. You have to do a drill that you don't want to do. You're tired. You want to kind of just stop, and you can't. You have to keep going, right? And so that discipline helped me. Um, it's something that I took away from it. And so once I stopped playing, um, I tried to figure out again where to put my time, where to invest that time. And one thing that I was sure about and that I do enjoy and wanted to keep doing was to keep training and being, in the best shape I can be and being healthy. So I still pretty much trained every day, but I mostly just did weightlifting because that's what I enjoyed the most. Um, Later on down the road, actually more recently now, like I told you earlier, um I started incorporating cardio as well, but I didn't used to do that before that much. Just mainly just weightlifting because that's what I liked. But I figured that it's also important to keep your heart healthy, and not just have physical health and like strength and so on. And so I still try to incorporate that into my day. And so I would wake up still early in the mornings. Sometime before 4 and 6 usually, or sometimes I'd go past it like 7 maybe. And so I'd still wake up early, get that done in the morning, come back. I started being able to put my classes and schedule my classes early in the morning, because before with football I could only schedule them past 12. That was like the cutoff mark. And so I could now take some classes in the morning, which gave me some time in the afternoon. And in the afternoon, I would I've tried different things to see what I kind of like, what I don't like. One of the things I tried at some point was training for a triathlon. And
Ooh.
so, yeah, and so for a couple of days I started running, biking, and swimming. And then I figured that quite a big time investment that I wasn't as passionate about. And so I was like, because I was weight training in the morning and then going and training at night for the triathlon. And I was like, I think this is a bit much right now. It's hard to incorporate both things plus school, plus if I want to do any other thing. So I put that aside. And then I tried out, at some point I've tried out music, playing some instruments, maybe making some music on the computer with a music software. Uh I tried I've looked into different things that I can try. But the problem is I've never really found something that I'm like, oh, this is really cool. But with the podcast, one of the things I've tried, but this is more recent, right? Um, I do there are like I want to say there are 3 or 4 things that I enjoy a lot out of just things I do. One of the things that I do really enjoy doing is learning about different things, but learning about things that I enjoy learning about, right? Because like when you go to school, a lot of times you get taught stuff that you're not interested in, and you kind of just gotta plow your way through it. Just do what you got to do. But if you actually enjoy learning a subject, or me personally, if I enjoy learning a subject, I'm curious about it. I want to learn more, and I like to be knowledgeable about these things. So with the podcast, I have the ability to talk to people that know about these things and learn about them and learn about what they do and about their fields. And so this is another thing that I've tried to invest my time in. And so far, I think it's been the one that I've enjoyed the most, which is good. So I want to, keep doing this and talking to more people and kind of seeing where it goes.
I'm glad you found this. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of people nowadays have just tried to hop in on. Like, oh my God, let's start a podcast. Let's do a podcast. And a
Yeah.
lot of them, they have the idea of starting a podcast. Like, I'm guilty. I'm guilty myself. Like, I was like, I think I should start a podcast. I think I love talking to people. I love socializing, getting to know people's experiences and stories, and hearing them and learning more about people in general. But I never was able to take that step into having a podcast where I go to talk to people.
Do you listen to
So
podcasts?
here and there,
Okay.
mainly related to, fitness, physical therapy, stuff like that, athletic training, strength and conditioning, stuff like that, just to further my own knowledge in this field.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's like if I'm listening to a podcast, I'm reading books, man.
Yeah.
Books
Books
have
are great.
been books have been helpful. I try to do paper books so I can actually have the book. Occasionally I've listened to like 1 or 2 audiobooks. And I think it depends who's talking. Like, I think if the author or the
Yeah.
person, the narrator, is very monotonic, it's like, all
Boring.
right, this is kind of boring. But if
Yeah.
you get someone who knows how to fluctuate their tone, okay, at the more important parts, the highlighted parts of the book, then it's like, okay, I can really get into this, and I hope this person actually reads more books to me. And then you realize it's a different person for every book.
Yeah. I haven't see the thing with books and like I don't like to read. I've never really enjoyed reading that much. I think out of pleasure, um, actual novels or books. I mean, like maybe kids' books I've read some, but like actual novels or books I've read maybe novels, so like more extended, I guess, pieces of writing. I've read maybe 2 throughout my life, I think. That I wanted to read. I've read some school stuff, but that I actually wanted to read and I enjoyed reading and I finished them. I think maybe 1 or 2. Um, I don't like to read that much, but I like the fact that people want to share this knowledge. And it's it's kind of hard for me because I want to be able to learn these things, but I don't like reading. And so sometimes I'll try to put on an audiobook. Um, I have Audible, so I try to listen to some audiobooks and learn that way. And I prefer that 1,000 times over reading. But like you mentioned, right? A lot of the times it's these kind of like monotone authors that are or people that are reading narrators, and you just get bored. It's like, man, this is not fun. Like, this is boring. And so what I like to do, or where I try to learn the most from, is from podcasts, right? That's also partly what inspired me to want to do my own, is listening to these people have a conversation, because you not only get that one perspective from the author, which maybe wrote the book, but then you get input from the other person that they're talking to. And so you get to learn from both sides, and it's more engaging. It's not a no, 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 no. It's like, okay, you get excited about this, and then maybe this other thing is kind of boring. And so it's that switch, like you said, the fluctuation of tones and stuff like that makes it interesting. But I enjoy learning, and so I would like to get into more book reading. And this one that you're mentioning right now, where you mentioned the being present, what was it called again?
It's called the Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Power of Now. Yeah, like that's something that I think would definitely interest me.
Yeah,
So
I think
I want to try to get more into books.
I think he's reading books was always hard for me. Like in school, you're forced to read books based upon the teacher's requirements. After I graduated high school, it's like I'm not reading books ever again. Like, why would I? I hated reading books.
Yeah.
Then you find out you didn't actually hate reading books. You just hated being told to read books. And then so it started off, I just find books that you enjoy reading, right? Do that. When you do that, oh, like I actually like reading books. Like they're kind of cool. These are books I like, I enjoy. I choose to read the book. I'm not forced to read the books. And then slowly but surely, once you like to, develop that habit of reading, okay, now you can start reading books that interest you, but might not be as fun or as glamorous. And so now, I'm chipping away at books that I necessarily wouldn't have chosen as my first choice. But oh, okay, there is a book I like. Okay, let me check it out. Or that my friend recommended it to me. I'll check it out. Um, if it's not my cup of tea, I'm still gonna read it because I now have the capacity and built the capacity over time to actually sit down and read a book. But if it was a recommendation as my first read and I didn't like it, I probably would have stopped like 10, 15 pages in and just said, why am I reading this book? This is terrible. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's also hard for me I tend to get distracted easily when reading. And I struggle to read, like any little thing tends to distract me when reading. So if it's a noise, or if it's some sort of change in, like, glare in the atmosphere or outside or whatever, um if it gets cloudy or if it gets sunny, just random things really distract me from reading. And it's already hard enough for me to focus on it. It's weird. With other things, I don't really get distracted as much as I do with reading. So maybe I'm sure it's a skill you can get better at, but I've struggled with that over the years, to where I'm reading and then I find out page and a half later that I don't have a clue what I just read about.
No, I get that, man. And there are still times when that happens to me. I'm like, I don't even know what I just read. So I may have to go back a couple pages, read it again. But I definitely get that, man. I definitely get that.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the problem with books, I guess. And the cool, I guess, thing about podcasts as well is, um as if you're hosting one, right? If you're the person that's inviting someone, and you're the one that's asking the questions, so on, you have the ability to, I guess, answer your doubts regarding a certain topic or whatever. So if I'm listening to another person's podcast and they're talking about medicine, right? It's just an example. And they're talking about what happens when um you get sick with this virus, right? But then I think of a question that I would like to ask them, and they don't cover it. And I kind of stay with that curiosity. I'm like, man, like, I wonder what would happen if this would happen, or something like that. But by being able to talk to them directly, to the people that are knowledgeable about these things, I have the ability to seize that curiosity. And so that's a cool thing about being able to ask these questions yourself.
And I think being a podcast host is dope, man. I think from the videos I've seen of you doing it, man, you definitely enjoy it, man. And that's huge, man. I think starting a podcast really starts with just being interested in other people, right? Especially if you're doing this type of podcast, right? If you're doing a podcast to talk about X, Y, and Z topics that you are already engaging in as a platform, that's a little easier. But if you're talking to people from different walks of life, you just genuinely have to be interested in other people. And it's hard to just say, oh, let's talk about X, Y, and Z, because I've always talked about X, Y, and Z. But with every new person you're going to meet, right, there are different things they want to talk about. So having that genuine curiosity about other people's lives, what they're up to, is definitely something that I think, one that you do very well with when it comes to these podcasts.
Thank you. I was gonna ask you, just kind of out of what you mentioned from that you've listened to some and that you listen to some that are somewhat related to what you do in physical therapy and so on. Like what kinds of things do you like to listen to? Because a lot of what I listen to are from uh people that are in some way again also related to maybe physical therapy, maybe nutrition, maybe exercise, because that's a big part of my life. As I know it is of yours as well. So what kind of stuff do you listen to?
First and foremost, the biggest one that I've been listening to is the PJF podcast by Paul Favorites, performance coach. Works with NBA players. He has guests for all his podcasts more often than not. But he's just talking about current research or new research, things he's found out to be very beneficial. So my long-term goal is to work with NBA players, not NBA players ideally, but basketball players, right? Helping either youth athletes, college athletes, pro athletes, whatever it might be, just work with basketball players. And the guy is very good at what he does, bringing a lot of knowledge, right? And it's very detailed, right? And I think as a coach, you care about the details, so it's a great listen. But when you're talking to your players and your athletes, they might not always care about the details. And just being able to articulate that to them is very important. So Paul does a very good job of just bringing in new information and being open to like, all right, this is what is being said. Do I like it? Do I agree with it? Yes or no. But I can see why people would implement this into X, Y, and Z for their athlete. Um, it's a great podcast. I've been listening for about a year and change. Yeah, probably a year and change. Um, and it's just been a great thing. I'm not a regular per se, but I do my best. Whenever a new episode drops, I'm doing my best to get on and listen because he wouldn't be where he is today if he didn't know anything.
Right.
And he's obviously one of the premier athletes that he's worked with is James Harden, one of a top 10 NBA players. So when he's working with guys like that, he's doing a very good job. And it's great to learn from other people in your field because a lot of people in this industry, whether it's fitness, strength and conditioning, or even physical therapy, the the underlying goal, purpose, if you will, for a lot of these people is simply to help people become something more, tap into that potential that they don't know they have. So they're willing to share that knowledge with other people in their industry, in their line of work, because the goal is to help everybody, right? And at times it comes at a cost, but more often than not, it's like, look, we're just here to spread information. We're here to share with others because we want everybody to be better.
Yeah. Do you know knees over toes?
Yeah, I've seen these over toes guys on
Okay.
Instagram. I'm not sure if it's a podcast. I don't listen to it if he does.
No, the YouTube
Um,
channel. I think he has
okay,
a
yeah,
YouTube
no,
channel.
I've only seen his Instagram. I'm not a
Or
big
maybe
YouTuber.
Instagram. I'm not sure. I might be wrong, but yeah, yeah, that guy.
Yeah, he's got a lot of flack. I mean, but then again, it's like, do you understand what he's saying, or do you just disagree because that's what you've been told your entire life? Oh, your knees can't go over your toes. Uh, there are times in sports and daily life where your knees have to go over your toes.
Yeah.
So to say he's wrong is not right. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
he's said some interesting stuff like to just strengthen your knees when it comes to, for example, um pulling a weighted sled instead of like pushing it. You can or you can push it, but then just pulling it and walking backwards, and how walking backwards can make a big impact in strengthening the tendons around, well, the muscles around your knee, which in turn then like stabilizes the tendons and everything, right? So I think he has some interesting stuff. I haven't looked much into it, but I heard him in an episode of a podcast, and so I was listening to his episode, and he said some interesting stuff like that. Whenever it comes to, I guess, athletic training and physical therapy, I don't get too much of my information from podcasts. I listen, like, the whenever I do listen to some something related to sports and athletics in terms of podcasts, it's more so the brain aspect of it and how the brain interacts with the rest of your body. And there's this professor at Stanford called Andrew Huberman. He has a podcast, but he's also been in other people's podcasts. He's a neurobiologist. Um and he a lot of the things that he does are about how the brain and brain chemistry interacts with the rest of your body in terms of how, as it relates to exercising, and what kinds of things, supplements, herbs, vitamins, what kinds of things a person can take to address certain issues. um he was talking about in an episode I recently listened to recently. He was talking about the effects of like sauna, for example, and like an ice bath. And he was saying, which I didn't know, right? He said something interesting. When it comes to ice bath, if you take an ice bath right after you're done weightlifting, specifically, right? So in the next 4 hours after weightlifting, it actually diminishes the potential muscle gains that you can make. You have to take it ideally after those first 4 hours after you finish weightlifting, because the inflammation in the muscle, which I didn't know, but the inflammation in the muscle after weightlifting is what causes your body to then adapt to that level of inflammation and be able to uh, repair these micro tears in the muscle, right? But if you get into the ice bath right away, the inflammation comes down, like it reduces, and so the adaptation that your body has to endure is less, as if that inflammation was not reduced. So that's something I didn't know. And in football, a lot of times I went into the ice bath right after working out. And so unless it's something that, for example, during the season, athletes aren't trying to necessarily gain muscle mass. And so in that sense, since you're not trying to gain muscle mass, but rather to prevent injury and to reduce soreness and so on, in that case, it makes a lot more sense, because you're getting in right after, you're reducing that inflammation, and you're probably going to feel better, right? But and you're not probably not going to gain as much muscle mass, but that's not the goal. The goal is to stay healthy during the season. But then in the off season, when you are trying to gain muscle mass, a lot of these athletic programs, I'm sure, as I did in football here in Miami, they don't tell you these things, and then you go in there after a big leg day and you're just diminishing the potential muscle gains. That's something that I learned from what he was saying, which I think is pretty cool or interesting.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what he's saying. Well, two things, right? Back to the knees over toes guy. Uh, you see it in a lot of gyms nowadays, a lot of facilities. You'll see people walking backwards on treadmills, and it just shows you the influence that people can have on other people in this space. But I think a lot of times, a lot of people are doing it because he said so and presented an article or two about why you should do it. But then again, it's like there are exercises that he's doing that if you're a novice, when it comes to the gym, you might not want to start with that. There are other things you might want to do. Um, but it's just understanding when you're doing something, why you're doing something, And oh, okay, do I understand the purpose, or am I just doing this because so and so told me to do it and he has great knee health now? Because you don't know how many hours or where he started in his journey unless you've been there with him for day one. And a lot of people on social media probably haven't. So like I said, you gotta take everything that you see on social media when it comes to fitness trainers, even physical therapists and athletic trainers and strength coaches. They're only showing you a fragment or a snippet of what the actual training or physical therapy or rehabilitation actually looks like. They're just putting out what they want people to see, but will get them a lot of clicks and a lot of views. Um,
And
and
it's
that's one of the
also
big
a very sorry. You can finish. You can finish. I'm sorry
No,
about that.
I think a lot of times it's just people are so caught up. Oh my God, I saw this on social media. This is how it has to be because so and so doctor or so and so physical therapist said this is the best way to reduce knee pain. Okay, that's one exercise that they did for 2 or 3 sets. Do you think it's all they did to help reduce their knee pain?
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned that. I guess people shouldn't just necessarily take these things and immediately apply them to their training. I think it is good to try new things and to see what works and what doesn't. But it's also very, and I've come to realize this with myself, it's very um what helps one person is not necessarily what helps another. Like each person's body is very different. There are certain exercises that I've done that's helped me with that have helped me with certain things, which maybe if other people did them, they wouldn't, and vice versa. Like me, I have a patellar tendonitis on both my knees, and they used to flare up back when I was in football more so than they do right now. Like right now, I've been pretty pain free in that sense because I've learned by myself, or not necessarily by myself, but I've learned um, in my own routines how to implement things that help my knees be better. Because when I was with football, they would have like a general program that everyone does, and I'm sure that some of the things we did weren't necessarily tailored towards what's best for my body. But since I've tried new things, now that I don't play football anymore, that I've tried new things, implemented new things into my routine, and I've seen what helps and what doesn't, I'm able to tailor my training towards what makes me feel the best. And so now that pain is, not really there anymore. It's just my knees are pretty much the best shape they've been. Um, I used to get shin splints as well sometimes when lifting. I don't really get those anymore because I've learned work in how to work in like calf training, and I also learned how to work in the what do you call it, the
The
muscle
anterior
right at,
tibialis,
yeah, the tibialis muscle.
hip
So
raises.
yeah, so I've learned to work that into my training as well and stretch that muscle as well. And so it's these things to where if you see certain things on Instagram or you learn a specific routine, it might work for you, it might not, but each person's body is very different and you got to learn what works for you and what doesn't. But I guess the best way to do that is to try things, try things carefully and to not go in all in right away. Cause like you said, if you're a beginner and lifting or whatever, and you just go all in a specific exercise, you might get hurt. So you just got to look out for those kinds of things and be careful when implementing them into your program.
Right. And I think one of the big things too is like in my space is finding a coach, right, to help you at least in the beginning of the process, right? If you're an advanced athlete and you know how to work out, great, continue to do what you're doing and push yourself in that regard. But if you're new and trying to get into into better shape and live a more physically active lifestyle, yeah, it might be, cost some money to, get a personal trainer or hire a coach, whatever it might be. Um, but it's going to be worth the investment, right? It's going to pay dividends, right? You don't have to do it for the entire life, but once you do a couple sessions here or there, they get you on the right path. It's like, oh, okay, I feel comfortable doing this now. All right, I'm going to go do it on my own now. And now I
Yeah.
have a starting point. I know what to do. I know what the technique should look like. And then now you're doing your own thing. But if you're going to go in doing your own thing, not really know what you're doing, but you're following some fitness program that you found online, I'm not saying it might not work, but if you start to have questions about, oh, this doesn't feel right, or is this the muscle that's supposed to be sore, or is this the muscle that I'm supposed to be hitting? Am I, engaging my core properly? Am I, doing X, Y, and Z right? You don't know because you can't ask that person who presenting you the program because they're on social media. And that's
Yeah.
why I think a lot of people might get discouraged. Oh, I saw this program, but it's not working. Okay, well, are you doing it to the T? Or maybe, guess like you just said, right? Some programs are great, and what works for you might not work for me.
And there's, I think I agree, I think there has to be, maybe it could be a coach, a friend, someone that that can give you some like initial guidance. I think that's important. One of the things when it comes to like you said, living a more physically active life, and I'm gonna focus more so on lifting weights, and because that's what I'm personally more involved in, and that's what I know more about. But when it comes to that, which that does, or that is incorporated in most sports anyway, in some form or another. But a big thing in that like realm of weightlifting is a lot of times, you'll see people that are doing whatever exercise and they don't have the proper technique, or they're not doing it right, or they're doing something that shouldn't be done in a specific way. And even if you do get training and have someone telling you how to do things, there's a lot of people that don't know how to do things properly. And like, you can hire a coach, you can hire a personal trainer, but I'm sure there's a lot of personal trainers which are going to tell you to do something and they're not telling you to do it right, or maybe they're not as focused on details and you end up not doing it right, which then can contribute to you being more disposed, or not disposed, but being more likely to hurt yourself because of whatever, right? So one of the things, for example, when I was lifting in football, was we did some Olympic lifting, so like hand cleans, power cleans, that stuff. But they never really, they emphasized some technique, but not the technique that you see like Olympic weightlifting people do, right? So sometimes, when you catch the bar during the clean movement, you'd maybe um kind of lose balance a little bit and go on your toes instead of staying on your heels, and just being able to catch the bar like at a good deep squat position. All that stuff, like they didn't emphasize that much. They did to a point where if it was really bad, they would address it, but I never really learned it like well. And so when I was done with football, one of the things I did, because to me, I incorporate those Olympic movements. I do like snatch and clean and stuff like that. I incorporate those in my training because it helps with mobility quite a bit. Like hip mobility, because I'm able to squat like pretty low. Wrist mobility is a big one, like by catching the bar with the power cleans and the hand cleans. Wrist mobility is a big one. Shoulder mobility, because I do overhead squats and snatches. And so I think that's important to have that mobility. And so I started, when I was done with football, I started going a lot less weight, like just a lot less weight, something that I would normally be able to do pretty easily, but then just focusing on, okay, just literally just maybe even just the bar, just focus on actually doing it the way it's meant to be done. And if you do it this way, then you're going to be able to surpass your previous like PRs or plateaus or whatever, just because you're now doing it right. And I'm not even focused on lifting that heavy anymore, but more so just kind of um working more reps with lighter weight. And because that's what made that was is what has made me feel better. And so, and feel my feel make my body feel better. And so I started doing that. And again, some of the pains I used to have, like my tendonitis, right, started getting better. My shin splits started getting better because now I was focusing on that. So it's important, if you do hire a personal trainer, if you do hire a coach, if you're looking at these videos or whatever, and you try to start to implement them into your routine, it's important to know kind of it's hard, but it's important to know what kinds of things to look out for to be able to do the exercises right. And it's hard to know what to look out for if you're just starting, right? How do you do that?
Right. And, you know, and one of the biggest things that I think, you know, as a coach that I looking at other coaches is, yes, you know, you might have a background of working with, you know, Division 1 athletes or pro athletes, but can you also work with, you know, the 24-year-old 9 to 5er who has never lifted before? Now, obviously, if you want to stick with college athletes and pro athletes, by all means do that. But your ability to take complex movements and make them simple for everybody, I think that's a hallmark of a very good coach, right? Being able to break things down so greatly that it's easy to understand, right? Because you get some coaches who will say, oh, like my forte is, you know, Olympic lifting, or my forte is, you know, calisthenics, my forte is Olympic lifting. That's all I'm ever going to do. Well, it's like, well, if the client doesn't want to do that, the patient doesn't want any part of that, can you still find a program and write them a program that's going to address their goals without having to do Olympic lifting? Because now you're, for example, if you're doing Olympic lifting, right? That's to a degree a dangerous movement if you don't know what you're doing,
Mhm.
right? And if for someone who's a novice or looking to get into training, why would you want to introduce that type of stuff, right? We can simply just start with functional movements, right? You know, obviously, if your hinges, your pulls, your pushes, right, your squat, right. I think one of the things that we start here with our we have a work capacity series. So for everyone who comes in and does the consult with me, and any of the other coaches, we have a work capacity series, right? We've got 3 exercises, 3 movements that you pretty much have to be able to do in order to work out. Otherwise, you probably should be getting more checked out for physical therapy and strength deficits, or mobility deficits, or maybe even in a hospital. But you got to do an elevated push up, right? So you're doing push. You've got to be able to squat, right? If you need to use the bathroom, you have to be able to squat down. If you need to sit down on a, you know, on a bus or sit down in a chair, you've got to be able to sit down. You got to do a squat. And then the last thing we have is the carry, right? You like you're carrying grocery bags, or you're carrying your suitcase, right? These are 3 functional basic exercises that everyone can do, and they're all modifiable and they're easy to coach, right? So people who are new to lifting or new or want to get into lifting, these are 3 things you can just simply start out with that are very foundational and basic movement patterns. But the thing is, you'll see a lot of people say, oh, we're going to start doing reverse lunges, or we're going to start doing step ups, we're going to start doing, you know, a deadlift. And that's fine if you know how to coach it properly and you can make it easy for the client. But if you can't do that, just simply start them off with very basic movements, right? Ideally, not many single leg movements, right? Just simply starting off with using both legs, both arms at the same exact time.
Yeah.
Um, I think one thing that you mentioned earlier too that I wanted to touch on was the inflammation thing. I know we're jumping around a little bit, but the
Yeah, no,
inflammation
that's fine.
part, it is spot on, right? I think a lot of times growing up, people hear about the Rice principle, and it's about, oh, you have rest, ice, compression, elevation, all that good stuff. Um, but at the same time, your body is one of the most adaptable things, you know, in the world, right? So if your body wants to have an inflammation process, there is a rhyme and reason for that. Let it take its process, right? And after a couple of days, then you can start to, you know, ice and do that. Um, However, there are a couple of things, right? If you're playing AAU basketball, or you're doing a 7-on-7 league, or you're playing baseball and you have multiple games in the same day, all right, maybe you want to get the inflammation out as soon as you can because you have to go back out and play. And
Yeah.
obviously, if you have a lot of inflammation, it might be harder to play. So there are different cases or different reasons as to why you would do something. But I think, you know, you were spot on with the idea of the inflammation process, right? Let it take its course, let things happen, and your body is going to recover and be stronger because of that. But if you're going to tell your body or send signals to your body to say stop doing what you're doing, it's like, wait, what? Why are we stopping this?
Yeah.
Why are you doing something I want to do? And the biggest one that I think you can relate to, I when I heard about this, I was like, oh my God, my life was a whole lie. The idea of putting your hands on your knees when you were tired, whether it was after conditioning or just
Oh yeah,
running,
bending down.
bending down. I think
Yeah.
my entire life, my entire sports career was a lie to me. Coaches like, oh, put your hands on your head, like the air is up there, not down there, type of thing. And I'm like, Coach, man, my body's telling me to put my hands on my knees. What are we
There's a
doing
reason
here?
why it's doing that.
Right. There's a rhyme and reason for that. And then they're like,
Yeah.
no, mental toughness. I can buy the
That's
mental
the
toughness
biggest
thing.
reason. Yeah, it's a mental toughness thing, right? They don't want your opponents to see
Right.
you being tired.
Right. I get that. But if you want to perform at your highest level, would you rather have me be mentally tough or at 100% physically? I'd rather
Right.
be at 100% physically so I can go do what I have to do versus being at 85%, but saying, oh, I'm mentally tough.
Right.
And I think that for me was like, all right, you know what? If my body is telling me to do something, I should probably listen to it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's with this inflammation thing, and then I mean, yeah, this like hands on your knees thing. Like I said, the hands on the thing, hands on the knees thing. I think it's a little bit different because I think a lot of coaches do it to show that you're tough, right? But with this ice bath thing, I remember we would sometimes come out of practice and they would like tell the position groups you have to get in the ice bath. Now practice is different because it's not weightlifting, but I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think that sometimes after lifting, after a hard lifting session, they'd be like, oh, you know, every position group has to get in the ice baths right now, and they would like check who's there, who's not, or just they would very much encourage it. And so it's just you know, Miami's a big Division 1 institution that has a lot of money, that has, I'm sure, a lot of research in terms of like the people that they hire and their knowledge. It's just how could something like this not be told to the players, right? How can I find about it in a podcast about this professor from this professor? Just because I'm curious and I want to find out. How did these people not, these higher up people that dedicate their lives to this, not know this, or why is this not communicated? And so it's not just this information, but there's so much more information as well that a lot of people are not necessarily aware of that's out there. You just have to look for it. And I I don't know. It's funny to me how these or odd how these big institutions perhaps don't have knowledge of these things.
Right. I think, you make a valid point. There could be two reasons. I think one, like there's an old school mentality versus a new school mentality. But one thing they might not tell you is, would you say this is the same at other schools, right? Because Miami is different in the sense that,
I
the
don't know.
humid, the heat, right? We're out in the summer. Your body's core temperature is probably going to be a lot higher than if you were having, training camp in the summer, at Notre Dame, right? And humidity plays a huge role in that. So the rationale could be, we're just trying to cool your body down as quick as we can before you guys go back inside. Because there had been times where you might know, like you go to the locker room and you got people laying down, or it's like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. Like we might pass out. It's like this is a way to safely cool people down before they come back inside, so they're cooling the body down. Um, I think it's just something you have to ask, administrative, and they're more than happy to answer. I think, like you alluded to, like there's information out there, you just have to go find it. Sometimes it's you have to ask, right? If you don't ask, you won't know. But that's my rationale. They never told me why we were doing it. Like I would help set up the ice baths and everything. They never told me. And as a sophomore, junior, I was just like, oh, okay, we're doing it. We're just setting it up. Um, I wish I had asked. But looking back on it, I think a lot of the rationale behind it is just simply the fact that we're in Miami, the humidity, the heat. Sometimes the it gets hot out on Green Tree, man. Even as someone who wasn't playing, I'm like, yo, I'm cooking out here. But I think
Yeah.
that is a good reason to have those ice baths where you can just cool your body down rather quickly, get it back down to, a normal level, if you will, and then you can proceed on with the rest of your day. I don't think it was to decrease inflammation or, prevent you guys from gaining muscle or anything like that, but just to like, recovery thing to get your body back to a temperature that's normal after being outside for 2 hours in the hot, humid weather.
Maybe. I mean, it's a matter of sacrificing some things for others, right? I mean, if are you, willing to decrease the potential muscle gains that someone's going to have to then lower their body temperature when maybe it could just lower naturally over time? Or do you want to do that? Or do you want to maybe take the risk that it won't lower over time? I'm not sure. It's just a matter, I think, of sacrificing some things for other. I'm not sure what the administrative decisions are or aren't, it's just something that I learned that I was like, hey, I think this information is valuable. If I would have known this at the time, I wouldn't have taken the ice bath after lifting. If it was a hard lift, I'd rather just wait it out and then ice bath the next day, right?
Right.
Or something like that. And it's not just the ice bath, right? There's a lot of valuable information in terms of sauna. I mentioned that, and how during sauna sessions you have these heat shock proteins that release in your body that can help with cardiovascular health and with muscle like helping build muscle as well, from what I heard. And so it's these things which we don't get told about. We don't, they don't have a sauna inside the like the athletic facility, which perhaps if they did, it could help athletes in some way. We have a hot tub, but I don't think it's the same thing. And so I think there's aspects of athletic training and of health and just things that maybe could be incorporated in certain programs. I'm not saying like it's just Miami or it isn't. I don't know. I don't know about other places, right? But I think there are things to learn and information to learn that can benefit programs all around the United States and in the world if people learn about this information. And like I said, you just have to go out and look for it. And hopefully there are more people that are willing to disseminate this information and communicate it, because it's not as easily accessible if you don't necessarily know what you're looking for or where to find this information.
Yeah, you're spot on with that. And that is why, as someone who also used to coach athletes, one thing I tell them, and I will continue to tell athletes that are still in high school looking at colleges for whatever sport they're doing, yes, you're there to play, you're there to learn under the coaches and the program that's in place, but take a few minutes to talk to the sports medicine staff. Let understand who is going to be taking care of you in your health, your rehabs, your strength and conditioning, but more importantly, your recovery process, right? Because the demands of Division I sports or college sports or professional sports is going to be a lot more than what you've seen in high school. So take the 5-10 minutes, whatever it is, to introduce yourself to the sports medicine team, or even ask to meet them, so you have an idea, oh, this is who's taking care of me outside of the coaches that are there to coach the sport. All right, maybe I can learn a few things from them, pick their brain, but also just be transparent, right? Because a lot of times, like, oh, this is a great program is great, but they did not take care of me and my health whatsoever, and that's the last thing you want to happen as an athlete. And I think a lot of people have benefited from that, just understanding, oh, like they are part of what makes the sports program the sports program. It's not just the players on the team and the coaching staff. There's a strength and conditioning team, there's the athletic training team, there's a physical therapy team, right? A lot of these moving parts that you don't really think about as an athlete because you're so focused on playing that sport.
Yeah, definitely. And especially in high school, like my case was a little different because I went to a very athlete oriented high school at IMG. And so, there it's different. It's not the normal situation for most high school athletes, but in high school, you don't necessarily get um the access to, first of all, like these more advanced recovery facilities or recovery oriented facilities. That's one. Like the staff that tend to be more knowledgeable about that. You don't get access to all this information and the emphasis on recovery. It's a lot, like you said, it's a lot more oriented towards performance, and I need to play well on the field so that I then get recruited, right? And so I think it's important when you mentioned about people being able to identify the importance of sports medicine when they're looking at the school that they're going to choose, and going out of their way to talk to these people, like the doctors or the athletic training staff or who may be there, just to get a sense of what that recovery scene is going to be like at that particular school, because I'm sure that it's different in all places, right? Especially because whoever like is leading or is head of the department, right? They have a, I guess, the overarching say of what happens in that department, how they treat certain things, and it's going to be different in a lot of places. I think getting an idea of how you are going to be treated, like you said, I think that's important, especially if you believe in certain things. If you already, as a high school athlete, know what works for you and what doesn't, you have that advantage that if someone tells you like, oh, we focus on these things, or whenever this happens, we treat it this way, and you know, like, oh, this is not the way I do things, this doesn't work for me, then you can then know, hey, maybe this place isn't the best fit. So like you said, I think that's a good thing for people to be conscious of when visiting schools, when trying to decide on a place to go of their high school athletes, and to take initiative in learning from a younger age about their bodies and what works for them and what doesn't. I think that's a big thing as well.
Yeah, you're 100%, man. And that's kind of why I work where I work now. Um, because as someone who's been an athlete, worked with athletes, right, at that Division 1 level, and to a degree with some professional athletes, some went to play pro, and then obviously working with some athletes at my internship. Uh, you realize that a lot of these athletes have the movement part down. Like, no problem, I can move very well. But the mindset part, right? I think today, day and age, you hear a lot about, people talking about going through depression, right? The psychological battles that every athlete's having, but not talking about, right? There's a nutrition component that I don't think a lot of people even care about, because you think as a kid, oh, I can eat whatever I want and be successful. And then as you get older, now you're looking at people like LeBron James who are investing well over $1 million into their health and nutrition because it's important. And look where it's gotten him, right? 19, 20 years in the league of playing at a high level. And then now there's the recovery aspect of things, right? So you're looking at these four things, right? Your mindset, your movement, your nutrition, your recovery. I related so well with the company EXOS, and maybe you've heard of them. They do a lot of NFL combine work, a lot of athletes. I think some of the athletes from Miami, I think, used to go there or still do go there, as well as other colleges. But it resonated so well with me, and I think it's important not just for athletes, but for individuals as non-athletes to understand that process as well. That living a physically active lifestyle, yes, the biggest thing is just moving, right? Getting into the gym, going for walks, running, just doing that stuff is a huge start and a big win for a lot of people. After that, like, the nutrition part also plays a huge role. Can you live a physically active lifestyle? Absolutely. But then are you going to go home and eat McDonald's and fast food and all these other things? You might still be in somewhat okay shape, but is it sustainable? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right. And the mindset part and the recovery part for, non-athletes is still important too, right? There are a lot of people that are fighting battles that you're never going to hear about because they don't want to talk about it. They choose not to talk about it. But I think we're doing a better job. I wouldn't say a great job, a better job of being able to come out and encourage people to talk about what's going on in their life and how we can support them. The
Yeah.
recovery part, it's free, it's easy, and a lot of people love to do it, but they just don't know how to do it. Sleeping, man, sleeping, getting enough sleep will do wonders for you, right? You know, people who are so used to sleeping 5, 6 hours a day, your body just gets so used to it. Like I mentioned before, it's a very adaptable, thing. However, the second they sleep 8 hours, it's like, oh my God, I feel worse. Well, try doing that 8 hours, right? More consistently, and you'll feel a lot more better. However, the reason why it was tougher for you is because your body got into a routine of 5, 6 hours that it became more efficient, right? So now when you do something completely different, it's like, oh my God, this is different. This sucks. But if you're able to get that 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep, your body will thank you so much. And if you're consistent with it, oh, so much better.
I don't think I necessarily am on the same page on that, because I 100% agree that sleep is, I think there's um I think there's three major aspects that come into place when you're talking about health. Like you said, being physically active, nutrition, and sleep. And sleep is probably the most important, I'd say, if not up there with like, if not up there with the like, it's definitely I probably think it's the most important. If not, then it's up there, right? But I still, even though I know the importance of sleep and I emphasize the fact that people should sleep well and should sleep enough, I and I've researched about sleep because that's something that really interests me. One of the things that really interests me, like I said, was kind of like how the brain interacts with the rest of the body in terms of health. So I like neuroscience, I like neurobiology, I listen to stuff like that. And one of the things that interests me is sleep, and I've researched about sleep. But it's weird because I think each person is different. Like it comes to it's the same thing with the body. So me, for example, right? There was a period in time where I wasn't sleeping. I've gone through different stages in my in throughout my life where I've slept less, where I've slept more. It depends, right? So I've slept sometimes um when I was in football my freshman year, and we had this program called 5:45 where we would start lifting at 5:45, and I had to wake up at four for something, and I had to commute and stuff most of the time. And so I wasn't going to sleep early either. I was going to sleep like at 12 or 1, and I was waking up at 4 pretty much every day, right? And that was terrible. Okay. Like I would be exhausted. And throughout the day, I'd be falling asleep in class, I'd be falling asleep in a lot of places. Just my brain was not great. It was not in good shape. I started to feel sad and started to just be down all the time. Evidently, not sleeping enough was a big problem, right? And so as soon as I was done with the program, I started to get back into my normal sleep schedule, and I felt better, right? And it kind of went back to a normal state. When I was done with football, I was like, okay, I'm done with football now. I can now emphasize sleep more than I've been previously because I don't have to wake up at this time anymore. So now instead of waking up at 5 or 6, I was maybe waking up at 7 and going to sleep maybe at 11, 10, 11, sleeping 8, 9 hours. And I did that for a while. Felt like no difference to what I was feeling when I was just to maybe sleeping like 6, 7 hours. I did that for a while too, I want to say maybe a month, something like that. It wasn't just like a 2, 3 day thing, and now I feel no difference. No, I wanted to try it for about a month. I felt about the same. And then during this summer, I was like, okay, now I want to try to figure out kind of what's optimal for me. And from what I've noticed is that whenever I sleep between 5.5 to 6.5 hours, in that range, averaging about 6, I'd say, I tend to feel good throughout the day. I don't get that tired in the afternoon, like nap wise. If I do, then I'll take sometimes a nap and I'll feel better. But if I don't, I won't take a nap. So I feel good. My just the way I feel in general is like normal. Like it's not it's I don't feel like bad or anything. I don't feel down. I feel good. And I have a limited because I don't sleep the full 8 hours or 9 hours. I have a limited amount of focus, I feel like, throughout my day. And so I can focus on the things that I have to focus on and the things that I have to do. Because when I sleep a longer period of time, when I sleep 8 or 9 hours, I my brain is a lot more active. I start to think about a lot more things. It makes sense, right? My brain's a lot more active. So I start to think about a lot more things, not just the things that I have to do, but then I start to overthink other things and start to get overwhelmed by thinking about the future and stuff like that. It's just a lot of things kind of hit me. And so if I limit my sleep, I can use that limited focus to things I have to use it and feel great. So, or feel good, feel how I want to feel, right? So it's weird. I think each person's sleep cycle and what they should sleep is different. I think each person should find out what they should sleep. So far, I think what I've found is that time frame is what sort of works for me. But I agree with you that if I could sleep 8 or 9 hours and feel great by sleeping 8 or 9 hours, I would try to do that just because I know that my brain is going to be healthier like that and my body's going to be healthier like that.
Yeah, you know, Alan, you make very good points. You're right. I think it is different for everyone. Um, the one thing that I will say is that there are also other variables at play that go into sleep, right? Sometimes it's not just about the quantity of sleep, but the quality of your sleep, right? What you're doing before you go to bed, right? If you're on your phone, let's say, all that blue light
Yeah.
up until the moment you turn it off, you put it away, and then you're trying to fall asleep versus putting your phone away an hour beforehand, no TV, nothing for that hour before you go to bed, that quality of sleep will probably be a lot better, right? Before, if you get the same amount of sleep, right? If you go to bed for 8 hours, one person, person A, has no phone or no TV time before that 8 hours of sleep versus person B who's on their phone up right until they go to bed, their quality of sleep is going to be very different, even though the quantity of sleep is still the same. Right. So there are other factors at play.
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
there are also other things like your REM sleep, your deep sleep, your light sleep, all that different stuff. And it's hard to really know because you're quote unquote sleeping at that time, but is your body getting a lot more REM sleep, or how much time is it spending in that phase versus other phases, right? And so you're right in that sense that everyone's body is different, right? So not a sleep someone gets might not be the same for everybody. Some people function very well off of 5, 6 hours of sleep. Like I remember in college, would come home super late, be the first person up. I'm like, dude, I don't know how you do it, but you're functioning very well. You're doing great. You're getting good
Yeah.
grades. You're able to go do everything you need to do. And then there are people who I know are like, I gotta be in bed by 9:30 and I'm waking up at 7:30. I'm like, how much sleep do you need?
Yeah.
And they but and an hour less and they would not be the same person. But if they got 9:30 or 10 to like 7:30, it was harmony.
But what
So
I
you're
do
right.
do, sorry, I'm just gonna say this quick and then you can keep going. What I do, however, is if I'm really tired throughout the day for whatever reason, if I have a really hard workout session and then it's maybe 4 o'clock and I've been up since 6 and I'm quite tired, I'll take a nap. And I'm not taking a nap kind of helps me recover that maybe lack of sleep that I'm missing, right? But it won't bring that negative effect of having me overthink a lot. And so, or on days off like today, I'll wake up my 6 hours sleep or whatever, and then if I'm tired later on, I'll take a nap, and maybe I'll take a 3 hour nap, and that'll help me make up some sleep from other days. Um, and I'll feel good. So I do incorporate naps. I think if I just slept that amount of time and never took naps, it'd be a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, everyone is different. So right now, my schedule, I don't really have time for naps, but there are times where it's like when I was in college, like I would go home after, an afternoon class, take a nap. I'm tired. Let me just take a nap real quick, wake up in a few hours, go back to night class or go do something else, make dinner, whatever it might be. and I felt like, oh my God, rejuvenated. Like this is awesome. This is euphoric. Um, so absolutely, man, you're making great points with that stuff. Uh, one of the big things for me is just understand getting people to understand that sleep is so valuable. I think people are just so caught up in like, oh my God, it's just sleep. I'm not doing anything. No, that is literally your time, your body's time to recover from all the stresses that were placed on it throughout that entire day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people should sleep the recommended amount of time, which is, I believe, 8 hours, right? Or more. If you need more, sleep more. I 100% think that people should make sleep a priority and sleep like if it makes them feel good, like 8 or more hours. Definitely.
And
It's
one,
just not the case with me personally. I've found.
yeah, and one thing that I think a lot of people still are just, I guess, don't have much knowledge about, and obviously I'm still learning a lot of things too. It's just stress is not, when you think of stress, a lot of people will say, well, I didn't do anything today, right? So how could I be tired? Well, I just worked, I was at a desk all day, 9 to 5. How am I tired? I didn't do anything. I was in meetings and calls. But it's like there's a stress, physical stress, there's emotional stress, there's psychological stress, there's just mental stress from making what you would like to believe are unconscious decisions or easy decisions, but your body and your brain are constantly making subtle decisions every like few seconds. And the more and more you have to make of the day, that's just more stress that's being placed on your mind. And it's kind of like, for example, like concussions with offensive linemen, right? The constant, your helmet to helmet every almost every play, but it's not as like, like violent as you might see a linebacker crushing a slot receiver. But those repeated small little things will add up over time. So that 9 to 5 job you're working, where you're at your desk, programming, doing whatever work you're doing, making calls, etc., you're still making decisions. Your brain's still working. There's still stress being placed within the body, and it's stress is very much similar in that sense to physical stress. It's just expressed in different ways because some people see it as physical stress and some people see it as mental stress.
Yeah. And you see that with focus too, right? So when you come out, for example, out of a 2 hour test that you've been having to prep for, and now you're really focused for 2 hours, maybe not right after the test, maybe a couple hours later or something, you'll be drained, man. You'll be like, I just want to go to sleep. I'm exhausted. Right. And you didn't go out there and run 10 miles. You took a 2 hour test, but your focus was so narrow on on that thing that you had to do that, like you said, it places stress on your brain and on your neural activity and so on. And so it makes sense that you're tired, and sleep, like you said, is one of the things that probably the most important thing that makes you recover in that sense, not only from the physical stress from running, training throughout the day, or just going about your day, but from that mental stress as well, from all the activities that you've had to do throughout the day.
Yeah, man, you hit it right in the head, man. You hit it right in the head.
Yeah. What, we've been going on for a while. I wanted to ask you, like, what kind of do you see going on for your future? Do you want to stay where you're at? Do you want to try something new?
Man, it's obviously, my easy answer is I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm being present right now. But obviously, I do look to the future here and there because you kind of have to have a roadmap at some point. You don't know, you don't need to know how you're going to get there. I want to get here. So for me right now, then the next big thing obviously is running this marathon. It's a huge bucket list thing for me. But after that, man, I want to travel a little bit. I want to go to Europe. I want to go to Morocco, which is in Africa. I want to go to Egypt. I want to go to China. I want to go to Northern Lights. When it comes to like the occupational side of things, in terms of like that sense, I love where I'm at, man. Being able to, do some prehab, some rehab, and build people back up in their fitness lives, and whether it's using strength and conditioning techniques or athletic training techniques or some physical therapy techniques. I enjoy that process because I find it fun, right? Showing people that they're capable of more than they think and unlocking that potential that they don't even know they have within them. is so rewarding on my side of things. I truly enjoy it. Right now, I get to work with, a place that allows me to kind of be who I am, and at the same time socialize and connect with members from all walks of life and different types of businesses, with people who are 22 to 70 plus or whatever, in the workforce. And then obviously here and there, we sprinkle in some athletes that have come into our facilities to work out. So I love where I'm at, and for the foreseeable future, I would love to be here. Um, but on my bucket list, at some point, I want to become a teacher. And when I say teacher, I would love to teach math, maybe anatomy and physiology. I wouldn't even mind teaching English, because I like to read now, and I would love to just show the next generation of kids and young adults what as a teacher you have so much influence, right? But getting people to see more, when you see more, you start to do more because you're more aware of things. And when you're able to see more and do more, you're able to become something more. And when you become something more, you have the ability to influence, inspire other people to do that same exact thing. So right now, like, to answer your question more concretely, I love where I'm at. I plan on being here for the time being. And there's no immediate plans or any plans in the near future to go anywhere else.
I see, man. Well, that's good, man. I'm happy that you enjoy where you're going, where you're at, and that you're excited for what could come in the future. Um, it's good. It's good that you have a broad idea. That's always good when you have some sort of structure. I guess it's what's the word? It's unsettling when you don't have any plans. And if you have a broad idea, at least you feel like more comfortable and more at ease. So in that sense, I mean, it's good that you have an idea and like I, don't necessarily have a broad idea as of now, kind of just focusing on seeing what I like. And sometimes when I try to think like, oh, what I like, it's somewhat unsettling that I don't have this thing that I kind of structure. Sometimes I do want to have that structure, right? So, but again, I don't think it's life isn't life isn't structured, right? You see it changes as you go on. So I'm sure that it'll happen to me, and it'll happen to you, that you'll come to see things that you like more than you used to, and some others that you perhaps don't like, and then you'll start to make choices accordingly, right? But I'm glad that you enjoy where you're at, where you're at right now, and taking it, as you said, one day at a time. But yeah, man, I appreciate you talking to me, and it was a great conversation. I'm glad we had the opportunity to catch up and talk about these things.
Yeah, Alan, man, I do appreciate you having me on. Actually, this is my first podcast that I've been on, and I loved every second of it. Hopefully I get to go on more. I think I have a lot to share, not just, related to athletic training or physical therapy and, strength and conditioning, but life, passion,
Life.
books, running, etc. I think there's always a story to be told, and you can always learn from other people, and everyone's experiences are always gonna be different. So yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to hearing from you soon, man. And if you're in the New York area in November, I would love to have you come out and support me on this run as I try and do 26.2 miles. Kind of crazy, but
You'll
I'm set on doing it. So
you'll
love to
get it
have you if
done.
you're around.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Down the road, of course, if you ever want to come on again and we can talk again about life or whatever it is that comes up in the moment, we can talk about that. Maybe when you run your marathon, we can talk then and catch up then again, and you can share how it went and how you got through it, because I'm sure there's going to be some bumps down the line, but I believe that you got it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, Alan. And like I said, thank you for having me on.
All right, Jordan.